Hi, my name is Lisa Hughes, and today we're going to talk about narrative theory. I'd like to begin with a brief introduction to some of the basic tenets of narrative theory. And the first is regarding the personal narrative, or the life story that individuals create that tend to be a cohesive story of events that helps them make sense of their lives. According to narrative theory, the problem occurs when we have experiences that don't fit within that narrative that we've created, and therefore that limits our opportunities. So in a nutshell, narrative theory is the understanding and breaking down of one's personal story so that it can be reconstructed or rebuilt in a manner that is supportive and empowering of our goals. So where does narrative theory come from? Narrative theory is derived from a variety of different approaches and theories. And the three we're going to discuss today is existentialism, postmodernism, and social constructivism. From existentialism, narrative theory gets the idea that individuals are unique and that their standards for choices should also be unique, but they are often influenced by outside standards. From postmodernism, we get the idea that there are wide generalizations across society that tend to reinforce power differences, and that instead of focusing on these wider differences, we should be focusing on the perspective of the individual or smaller groups. We also get the idea that narratives are influenced by these cultural generalizations. And finally, from social constructivism, we get the idea that reality is something that is subjective and is not an objective thing that we can refer back to. So what's in common that we get from these three different philosophies or ideas is that number one, individuals are unique, and number two, that individuals are influenced by outside or external sources. It should also be noted that Michael White and David Epstein are considered the creators of narrative theory, and they were interested in understanding how people perceive their worlds. Next, we're going to discuss the major concepts of narrative theory. And first, we'll start with the unique but shared stories or personal narratives. Again, we go back to the idea that most people's personal narratives are considered unique to themselves, but that there are some shared aspects of those personal stories with others within their environment, and those aspects reflect the values and the beliefs found in that environment. The second is the dynamic identity, and by dynamic identity I mean many theories tend to assume that once identity is created it is something that is constant. However, with narrative theory, they believe that identity can look different at different points in time. They believe there's a link between the life story and one's identity. And when we use narrative theory to change our life story, we actually also change our sense of identity. The personal narrative, again, is the story that the individual tells about their life. And it tends to develop by focusing on different aspects within the environment. So it is a process of selection and bias regarding what we focus on within our environment. These narratives tend to persist due to those cultural beliefs found in the environment and our habits of thought and behavior. Next, we talk about deconstruction, and this deconstruction is somewhat similar to insight. We're looking at breaking down and understanding and really challenging the life story and the assumptions that go into building that life story. And that's in an effort to move on to the next task that we talk about, reconstruction or reauthoring. This is really kind of the essence of narrative theory. And this is where we are changing that life story in order to align with our goals and our desired sense of identity. Not only does reauthoring our personal narrative give us a new perspective on the present and the future, but it also gives us a new perspective on the past. And finally, celebrating and connecting. This is celebrating our new personal narrative and our new identity and introducing it to others. So, problems and change in narrative theory. Narrative theory believes that problems caused by possibly two different things. And the first is those personal narratives that are actually saturated with negativity. These negative narratives tend to limit our understanding of ourselves and our capabilities. When we have a negative perception of ourselves, we no longer pursue certain goals because we don't believe that they're attainable. It's important to keep in mind the language that the client is using when you're using narrative theory and seeing what are they giving a negative connotation to and what do they give a positive connotation to. The next is the oppressive cultural beliefs and practices, and these again also lead to that negative personal narrative. We often have difficulty seeing these as something that are external to ourselves because these personal values and beliefs that we believe are our own have actually come from our environment, and they become so ingrained within us that it's hard to see them as something outside of ourselves. Narrative theory does not discuss conscious and unconscious thought. However, they do talk about subjugated knowledge. And this subjugated knowledge is knowledge that is really suppressed within the individual. It is information or values or beliefs that are left out or ignored by the dominant culture. So we're looking to bring that subjugated knowledge back to the surface for the individual. Change and goals within narrative theory. So we're looking to, again, increase the awareness of those oppressive cultural beliefs and practices that are found within society, and helping the individual realize that they have certain beliefs and assumptions that are limiting them. We're bringing that subjugated knowledge back to the surface so they can understand what's really important to them and who they want to be and what their goals are. We're also trying to externalize that problem so that the individual can see that the problem is not something within themselves necessarily, but comes from outside. We're also helping them to reconstruct this positive story and reconstruct their connections with others. Again, we want to assist them in attaining this new personal positive narrative that is reinforcing what their goals are. Once they're aware of these limitations, they can reconstruct that new positive personal narrative, work towards their goals, and that can help them maintain their positive narrative by introducing others to their new narrative and their new identity. And overall, each of these things is going to work towards providing that individual a sense of value. Opportunities and limitations with narrative theory. As with any theory, there are certain groups that this is appropriate to use with, and there are certain that it is not. Some examples of groups which it may be beneficial to use narrative theory with include trauma and abuse survivors, immigrants, older adults, children in foster care, juvenile sex offenders, individuals going through life transitions, and LGBTQ clients who are struggling with their identity. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you an idea of who this may be beneficial for. Those who it may not be beneficial for include those individuals who are in need of basic unmet needs. Things like a loss of housing and food and medical care. This would also not be beneficial for use with those who are in active crisis or those who have a presenting problem which may be challenging to the social worker, including certain individuals who, or certain groups of individuals who are incarcerated. Assessment and narrative theory. Assessment and intervention are kind of really overlapping within narrative theory. One of the first things that we're going to look at is that client-social worker relationship. And this relationship should be one of collaboration. The client is seen as the expert on their life, and the social worker, according to Walsh in the text, states that they are seen as the archaeologist. They're trying to unearth the basis from which that client is working from. Most importantly is an equality of power within this relationship. This theory, again, talks about the inequalities that are found within societal values and beliefs typically, and that's what's impacting the problem that the individual is having. So ensuring that equality of power within the client and social worker relationship is essential. This is a fairly brief approach to intervention. Again, we're going to start with focusing on understanding what the problem is according to the client in their terms. We're going to look at what the impact is of the problem on a daily basis of the client, and we're also going to look at what the strengths are that they might have to use when working with this problem. We're also going to look at the exceptions that there may be to the problem occurring. When is this problem not occurring? Or when are they able to actually help with the problem? When are they actually able to deal with this problem and win over this problem? And finally, we have externalizing conversations. So throughout the process, we are going to use question and conversation to point out these external forces that are impacting this problem. Seeing the problem as something that's external to themselves helps them learn to cope better with the problem. And now we can address, once we've looked at these things, where do we go from here? Our intervention in narrative therapy. Again, I will point out that intervention and assessment overlap somewhat within narrative theory. normalizing and strengthening. So we are normalizing the problem for the individual, and we are strengthening that individual so that they are able to deal with this problem. We are learning to understand how they deal with the problem and how they've dealt with other problems in the past. Again, we're externalizing the problem so that it is seen separate from themselves, and we're pointing out the influence of these external influences on the individual and their problem, which the client often may not see as big of an influence as it actually is. Again, we're discussing their strengths, and we're looking at what kind of resources they might have to use in battling this problem, whether they're internal or external resources. We're going to help them see this problem throughout the process as something that is normal. We're going to empower them towards change. Reflecting and deconstructing, we're trying to elicit from this client the assumptions that they have about themselves and about their environment. We're breaking down the problem in those beliefs or assumptions that are related to the problem and deconstructing that negative narrative that tends to perpetuate the problem. We're going to help them challenge those beliefs and assumptions that makes this problem continue to occur. Enhancing change and reconstructing. This is again where we are eliciting what those true values are and finding out what does this client really want their personal story to look like. We're not necessarily getting rid of the experiences that the individual has had, but we are giving them a new perspective to look at them with. We're finding exceptions to the problem, and we're helping them identify their potential unique outcomes that they may have when dealing with this problem. What are they going to do? What are their goals so that they can, what will this look like once they have won over this problem? We're going to, again, assist them in finding the resources that they may need. And we might need to even ask some spectator questions. Spectator questions are really questions that helps the individual think about how this new narrative will play out when they are with others. And finally, our celebrating and our connecting. We're helping them to connect with others with this new personal narrative and this new sense of identity, which will help them maintain this as they go on. And again, we're celebrating what this new narrative and new identity is. And at this point, the process of narrative theory comes to a natural end. Again, identity and social justice in narrative theory. I've already touched a little bit on the identity, but I just want to point out that our personal identity is resulting from that personal narrative. It is influenced by the dominant beliefs and values that are found within our culture. And we have these suppressed, subjugated knowledge of our values, so that we aren't able to understand this is actually who we are. Instead, our identity is based on these external values. We believe that if we don't live up to these external values and beliefs, we're developing a negative sense of ourselves. And we must help the individual increase awareness of the influence of those dominant cultural values and help them uncover that subjugated knowledge of what their own personal values are to help them redefine their sense of self and their identity. Again, we're going to come back to social justice here. Social justice is a very important concept within social work, and this theory right here addresses it very explicitly. There's a primary emphasis on social justice and empowerment within this theory. We are assisting the client by highlighting and challenging those oppressive values and beliefs that are found in our dominant society, and we're going to provide them resources and support in challenging and changing their thought process. The emphasis on social justice with narrative theory lends it to use with oppressed and discriminated groups, which is a group that social workers tend to focus on in their work. And now we're going to go to a role play of narrative theory. Again, one of the groups that we talked about before was the older adult population. And one of the outside external cultural influences that may be impacting that individual is that of ageism. We tend to have in society a belief sometimes that as people get older, they're no longer able or competent or understand what they can do. And so within this role play, you will see how the therapist helps that individual understand the influence of ageism.
Hi there, Mrs. Riley. How are you today?
I'm okay. How are you?
Doing okay? I'm okay, thanks.
I'm all right.
Just a reminder, I hope you remember me. My name is Lisa.
Yes, Lisa, I
I'm
do.
one of the social workers here. I was talking to, I guess let me start out with this, Mrs. Riley. I just want to remind you that anything that we talk about today, of course, is always held confidential. Unless you should say something like you feel like harming yourself or someone else. Of course, I would need to let someone know, okay?
I gotcha.
But I wanted to come in today and talk to you. I was talking to one of the nurses, and she said that you had kind of told her you were feeling a little bit down lately.
I am.
Okay, so I wanted to come in and kind of talk to you about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm just sad.
Well, tell me a little bit about what's going on.
I just, you know, since I've been in here the past couple weeks, it's getting lonely.
Okay.
And I just kind of feel, you know, I used to be so active in my family.
Okay.
And now I don't really have anything.
Okay.
You know, I used to be the one who always organized all the parties and ran all the parties and did all the cooking and the grocery shopping and everything. And now since I broke this hip,
Yeah.
I just don't feel like I can do anything. And I don't know where the future's going to be because I don't know what I'm going to be able to do.
All right.
It's really kind of low.
Well, tell me, so, since you've been here for a couple weeks now, right? So, have you been participating in any of the activities that we have here?
Some, but
Some.
I mean, the family comes to visit.
Do
and
they?
things.
Great.
They do, but it's just not the same as being home.
Sure.
You know, it's so different, and I just don't know. I mean, the activities here, but I'm used to being the one doing, not going.
Sure.
I was always in charge.
You
So
were the one in charge. All right.
I don't know. They're okay, but
How have you been? Your feelings of being down, has that been impacting how you've been eating, or?
Yeah, I don't do much.
Okay. What
Really
about your
don't want-
therapy? I know you have therapy
Yeah,
that they've ordered. Have you been doing that?
That's kind of fun because it gets me out of the room and I get to chat with people. And I know I'm getting better.
Okay, good.
And hopefully I will get stronger in the future. But it's just, I don't know. I'm just in a funk.
Okay.
And I just need to figure things out because I don't know.
And you don't mind, Mrs. Riley, if I just take a few notes while we're sitting
Go ahead.
here?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
all right.
Any solutions you have, I'm open to because
All
I need something.
all right. So now you mentioned a little bit about that your family, that your family visits. Tell me a little bit more. Now, I saw on the chart it says that you're widowed. Have you been widowed for long?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Love of my life.
Okay.
Love of my
goodness.
life.
I'm so very sorry.
Thank you.
And your children, you mentioned children. How many children do you have?
I have 2.
And grandchildren?
5 grandchildren.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, yes.
And do they all live locally here
They
then?
do. They come to visit.
Oh,
I wish
good.
they could come more, which they used to when I was home.
Sure.
They came more because you're home.
Sure. Okay.
Who wants to come to a nursing home and hang out? To be
Okay.
honest with you, I don't want to be here. I don't want them to be here.
Yes, ma'am. I
You
understand.
know, if we could be home, it'd be a lot better.
Sure.
Kids
sure.
could be outside playing or whatever, and you're watching them and enjoying them, and here you really can't do that.
Okay. All right. Tell me a little bit more about the kind of things that you used to do before you came into the nursing facility. I know you were in your own home. And you mentioned that you were kind of in charge of things.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What kind of things did you
We used
like
to have
do?
Sunday dinners once a month.
Okay.
Okay, and I would plan the menu. My daughter would help me do the grocery shopping.
Okay.
And my son would come over, and all the grandkids would come over.
Nice.
And we would just have a great day. If
Alright.
football was on, we'd watch football. If baseball was on, we'd watch baseball.
Okay.
Or the kids would just get together, all the cousins could get together, the 5 of them, they could go outside and play, or we would draw or color, or if it was a rainy day, we'd stay in and we'd color and things. So I just miss that. And once a month, it was our Sunday dinner. That's what we used to do. So
Now, were you doing that all the way up until when you came in the
yes,
nursing
until
home?
I fell and broke
Okay.
that hip.
Okay. So you're missing
Damn
that right
hip.
now. It's been a
Yes.
few weeks, and so you're missing
Yeah,
that.
well, and I don't know
Sure.
what's going to happen in the future. I don't know if I'm going home.
Okay.
I don't know where I'm going to go.
Is that, it sounds like, I guess, what is your goal? What would you like to see
I want to go
happen?
home.
Okay.
I want to go home and resume my life.
Okay.
I don't want to be stuck here.
Pick up back to where you were
Exactly.
before.
Exactly.
All right. Kind of as we're talking, I can definitely hear you talk an awful lot about your family and the importance of your family, being around your family, helping to be a part of all these activities
Yes.
that you have with your family. What other kind of things did you like to do? Did you like to do any other kind of activities when you were at home?
I used to do a lot of art I like to
Okay.
paint and I like to
Okay.
draw. So I
Okay.
try to show the grandkids that.
Oh,
They're,
nice.
they're a little interested, but
All
not
right.
always. But they used to like to come into my house and see my pictures and see
Okay.
what did Grandma do this week,
All right.
or what has Grandma,
Okay.
been kind of doing.
Mhm.
So
And have you been doing anything like that since
not
you've
really,
been there? No.
not really.
Okay.
I mean, I'd love to maybe if they had art classes, but I don't know what they have here.
Okay.
I've only been here a little while, so I really don't know
Sure.
what's out there yet.
Sure, sure.
So
okay.
maybe you could show me or tell me what's going on
Sure,
at
sure.
the nursing home.
Definitely. So it sounds like that's another one of a definite strength, area of strength for you, and of resource, of areas, a place where we can look at for maybe to help resolve this problem of you feeling down. Is it sounds like not only is your family a really big strength, but also your interest in arts and crafts and those kind of thing.
Yep.
I could see, you were really interested in maybe trying
Yes.
to do something like that again.
Yes,
okay.
that would be awesome.
All right.
If they had a class here that I knew of, or
Okay.
but I'm kind of shy and I really don't like to ask the nurses. I feel comfortable asking
Okay.
you because we're chatting, but
Okay,
I don't
all
know.
right.
I just don't.
Certainly, we can
Feel
definitely do
comfortable.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I want to talk. You've mentioned, breaking this darn hip.
Yes.
As we're talking about that, you've been feeling a little bit down since you've been here. Things aren't the same. It's important to recognize that this hip that you've broken, this is something that you only have so much control over. What you do have control
True.
over, it sounds like you're doing. You're doing the therapy and you're doing
I'm
your
trying
part.
because I want to get out of here.
Exactly. So you're doing what you need to do, what you're able to do, but the control that you have over this hip, that's kind of outside of you. So you do what you can,
True.
but there's only so much that you can do to control that.
True,
So
you're
we
right.
can look at what can you control.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
All right. You've talked about maybe doing some art classes here. So what we can maybe do is together we can look into what kind of activities they have
Okay.
and see if there's something that that you might be interested in doing. You also mentioned that the grandkids really like to come over and see what you did.
Yes.
And that you like to show them things. Do you think maybe
Exactly.
somehow you could get them involved somehow?
I think so. If we were able to get the supplies and stuff, maybe
Okay.
like hold art class in Grandma's room on a Sunday
Okay.
afternoon or something.
Okay,
That would
great.
kind of probably be fun.
And you think you would like
I
that?
think so. I think
Okay.
that, and then that would have them here.
Okay.
They're just not sitting around in my room
Sure. So
being
it
all
would give,
bored.
give you both something to do together.
Exactly.
It would kind of pull together those couple of things that you like as far as the arts as well as having your family there.
Yep.
So that might
Yeah.
be something that you could do.
I think so. That would
Okay.
be. I think it'd be kind of fun. It'd be kind of exciting. Like I could plan like what the assignment's gonna be or something like.
Okay.
The kids are coming in 2 weeks,
Great.
and get stuff, and then I could plan it. It would give
Okay.
me something, I guess. That would probably make me feel better.
So you come up with a great point here, Mrs. Riley. You mentioned planning something. Do you think that you could bring that same idea of kind of being the planner into, you've talked about the family dinners and how, your daughter's kind of doing that right now.
She is.
Um,
I don't want to step on her toes, though, so I'm
What
kind of
do-
worried about that.
do you think maybe you could talk to her about maybe helping with the planning?
Maybe.
And explain how, while you used to be able to do all of it before, you'd be able to stand at the stove and cook all the meals and
True.
whatnot, that when you get home,
Right.
if you can get home, you're still going to maybe be a little bit weak. So you might still be able to, not be able to do that part of it,
Right.
but you could still do that planning part.
That's true. That is
So
a
do
way
you
I
think
could be
maybe
involved.
that's something that you could work out?
I think so. She might be open to that. I mean,
Okay.
because, it is a lot of responsibility on her, too, to try to keep
Sure.
the family together because she knows how important it is for me. So maybe if I could take the planning part of it,
Okay.
she just did the cooking
Okay.
or something, maybe that would work.
Now,
That
how
might
would,
work.
how do you think you would feel
That
about
would make me feel good because I feel like I was part of it.
Okay.
Not just sitting down at the table and being served.
Great. Great.
Because that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the fun of it.
Okay.
It should be so much fun to do everything. If I'm just sitting there and here's your plate, Ma.
Okay.
That's no fun. And that's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm stressing about. So
Okay.
so maybe planning it would work. That would work.
All right. It kind of, some of the things that I hear you say almost makes me think a little about when folks start to talk about as we get older that we aren't able to do some things anymore.
True.
And that affects how we see ourselves.
Now, I don't feel like I can do anything right now.
Okay, so that's
Except
a good
sit
point.
in this chair.
So you're feeling like, I'm not able to do anything, I'm older, I've broken my hip, I'm not
Exactly.
able to do anything. But it's important to see these things that you can do.
Which I
You
could.
can continue to be, you can take on this planner role at this
Correct,
point.
yeah.
Not only with the Sunday dinners, but also with doing some arts and crafts with the grandkids.
Right.
It still keeps you involved with your family that you value so much.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would make it, and it would make it easier for me, but I would feel like I was still involved.
Sure.
And not just watching. I'd be
Mhm.
part of it.
Exactly.
Which I guess is what I'm missing.
And
is being part of everything.
certainly. And it's
Okay.
important to realize, you know, when I talked before about how this broken hip and as we age feeling a little bit weaker and those kind of things, that while those are things that, you know, those are kind of external to you, that's a health problem that is something that you can learn to manage.
Gotcha.
And the same thing with, we talk about how people start to think as we get older that we're not able to do things. That's kind of
My
something
son
that...
tends to do that with me.
Okay,
Sorry.
so that, you know what, that's kind of one of those things that within our culture, within our dominant culture, that people tend to make assumptions about. And it's okay to say, if you clearly do not feel like that,
Right.
you clearly do not feel like that as I get older I shouldn't be able to do things. I should be able
Exactly.
to keep on doing these Sunday
Right,
dinners and
right.
be in charge. So that's clearly not something that you are feeling, it sounds like, deep down, but maybe sometimes you get a little, I think, you know, we tend to we have those cultural values kind of ingrained in us, and we start to believe those. But it's important to recognize that assumption of what folks who are getting older looks like is not necessarily what you believe and what you value.
True.
So it's okay to say, you know what, that's outside of me as well. These other beliefs, we're looking at your values and your
Gotcha.
beliefs of the importance of your family, the importance of being in charge and being a part of it,
Yes.
and doing what you can. It sounds like you are a fighter and you want to do what
I
you
do.
can.
I want to very much so. And like I said, I just, my daughter does try to include me in everything, but my son, he's like, no, Mom, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. So
Okay.
that kind of makes me feel like I can't do it, but I still feel like I can do it. And I
Okay.
still want to do it. At least I
Okay.
want to try.
Exactly.
And I want to be able to give them the opportunity to try. So
Sure. So I think like it sounds like we've come up with some good ideas. When I came in, you said, you know, you were feeling kind of down because you weren't able to do anything.
I'm excited now.
You weren't involved in anything. So my suggestion would be, you said that your kids come and visit. The next time your son and daughter are here, you can sit down and talk to them. And if you'd like, I'd be more than happy to
I'd
come
like you
in.
to be there. It would
And
help,
we
I
can
think.
we can have a little talk and explain, you know, some of these things that you would like to try to do. That
Yes.
you would like to be that planner role at
Because my
this
son
point.
needs to hear it from someone else, not just from me.
And we can sit down and have a conversation so that he can understand who this new role of mom is. Right now, she's the planner at this point.
Exactly.
Before
That'd
you
be
were
awesome.
in charge of everything, and now you're in charge of all the planning. So working together and
Gotcha.
collaborating on how can we do this together as a family so that it works for you.
That gives me promise. That makes me
Great.
feel good. Like
Okay, great.
I would be excited about it. It'd be like kind of like a fun thing, making a to-do list, doing a
Okay.
chore sheet, doing
Great.
you know,
Great.
planning things. It'd make you feel good.
Okay,
You
great.
know, so that would be awesome.
That sounds great.
That
So
is
that
nice.
sounds like a plan. Do you think that sounds good?
I think it sounds good.
Okay, so what we'll do in the next
My mind's
time-
already going. It's already thinking about all the things I can do.
Fantastic.
That's for sure. I'm sorry if I'm like off the track, but I
That's
am
good,
just
that's
going and
good.
going and going. I'm already
That's
got some
fantastic.
activities
It
for
sounds
my
like
grandkids.
you've got some great goals lined up
I
here, and I
do.
think we're going to be able to move forward with
I think
this,
so. I think so.
So the next time your kids come in, Mrs. Riley, you let them know, let one of the aides know,
Okay.
and I will come down and we'll have a chat.
that would be awesome.
Sound great?
That would be awesome.
All right, Mrs. Riley,
Thank
it was
you.
good to see you.
Good to
You
see
take
you.
care. I'll see you real soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
Take care.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Now that we watched the role play, I would like to discuss a little bit of a reflection on this role play and point out some of the strengths and weaknesses that we might have seen in that. The first that we can look at is the externalizing of the problem. I believe the therapist did a pretty good job of helping the client understand the influence of not only the ageism that's found in society, but also the influence of that medical condition, that broken hip. And understanding that this problem was not necessarily something within her, but something external to her. Again, finding client strengths. This is another area that the therapist did a good job on, was looking at what kind of strengths and resources does this individual have. They discussed the support and the love of her family. They also discussed her interest in doing crafts and staying involved, and also looked at the strength of this individual's determination to get that hip better and get out of that nursing facility. And finally, finding a manner to connect. The therapist did a good job of really finding a way to help the client introduce her new personal narrative and her new identity with her son and daughter. Some of the areas of weakness that we can look at include the nonverbal communication of the therapist. This is always something to be mindful of when we're working with clients, and within this role play, if you notice, the therapist tends to talk with her hands a lot. After the role play was done, the individual who played the client in the role play actually made the comment that it felt like the therapist's hands were very close to her face. So that's something that, as a therapist or as a social worker, we need to be mindful of. Not only are we watching what the nonverbals are of our client, but we're watching our own, so that we're not making the client uncomfortable and that they feel they can open up and develop that relationship. The next area is the lack of use of direct exception questions. While the therapist did look for exceptions by expanding on the conversation and the statements that were made about the individual's family, she didn't come outright and ask, what kind of exceptions are there to this problem? When does this problem not occur? When is depression not with you? And by doing that and asking those questions, she may have actually gotten some more information that may have helped in understanding the problem further, as well as maybe helping understand what other kind of unique outcomes they could have developed from this. And finally, delving further into the spectator questions. Again, the therapist could have delved a little bit further into questions about how the son and daughter were going to feel about this new personal narrative and this new identity of mom as the planner, and looking at helping the client to understand how they might feel, how they might react, and how she might react to them. And finally, we're going to discuss the limitations and advantages of narrative theory. The limitations, again, we go back to, it's not appropriate for use with all clients as with any theory. We talked about those who may have unmet basic needs. It's not appropriate for those individuals, but once those needs are met, it should be noted it may be appropriate to use at that time. An article by Young also discusses the use of narrative theory with older adults who have dementia or other forms of memory loss, and discusses how we tend to look at our personal narratives in a timeline manner, and instead of looking at the sequential occurrence of experiences, that it might be more appropriate to look at the themes within the individual's life for those clients. A lack of labels. While this may seem like a good thing, as social workers we tend to not want to label individuals, it should be noted that we do not diagnose anyone with a specific disorder with this theory. And unfortunately, when we're not diagnosing someone, we might miss some other needed interventions or opportunities for the individual. It should also be noted here that in the age of managed care, where you have to have a diagnosis in order to bill for your service with that client, this may not be a realistic theory to use. And finally, the ability of the social worker to remain neutral in reconstructing that narrative with the client. It may be difficult sometimes for the therapist to understand the personal narrative or the desired personal narrative for that individual if they are from a different cultural group. Even more so, it may be difficult for the therapist to point out those oppressive, dominant cultural values if they are a member of that dominant culture. As always, we should always be aware of our own biases and have that ability to understand and empathize and appreciate the viewpoint and the beliefs of the client. We should be able to help them uncover those subjugated values so that we can understand where they would like to go, and they can understand where they would like to go and who they would like to be and what they would like their narrative to be. We want to make sure our values are not influencing what their new personal narrative is. And finally, some of the advantages. A focus on oppressed populations. Again, this can't be said enough. This theory is wonderful for working with individuals who are members of oppressed or discriminated populations. as social workers in general, we tend to have an emphasis on working with these groups so that they can have a better life. And so this theory is clearly an ideal theory for use with those groups of individuals. The strengths perspective. The strengths perspective is seen within this theory as we are giving the client a positive perspective on their life and their problems. We help them see the strengths that they have that they can use in difficult situations, and that's a useful skill for them to take and use in the future. And finally, empowerment of the client. Empowerment is very important within this theory. We're focusing on their strengths and we're promoting empowerment within the client so that they can see the potential that they have for control on their lives. This final slide is a list of references for all the information that I have given to you today. Thank you so much.